And just before we begin, I think it's only appropriate as we as elected officials here in the city of Brockton and what everyone else has been doing over the last several days throughout the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts is to pay tribute to the officer, Sean Gannon, Canine officer, that lost his life last Thursday, unfortunately, in a very, very sad way. So I'd like at this time that we take a moment just to reflect on his passing, brother, officer, naturally of all brothers. So why don't we just take a moment of silence. May he rest in peace, and just always keep in mind, councilors and everybody, that our police officers are protecting us each and every day, all the time, as we have one here even with us this evening. I thank him for being here as well. So with that being said, just a couple of items before we begin, just for some housekeeping matters, and I do want to make mention, Councilor Azak contacted me this afternoon. She's out of town today, and Councilor Sullivan's dealing with a family matter. So both of them couldn't be here this evening. I just want to make it clear that we're all on top of our next few weeks of scheduling. Now, next Monday, April 23rd, will be City Council right here at 8 p.m. in the Rom Little Theater. The following week, which is April 30th, there is no meeting because it's 5 Mondays this month. Monday, May 7th, Finance meeting. We're going to be at the War Memorial Building, and that's 7 o'clock p.m. The drama club begins that following weekend into a few days, and they use everything within this whole area. I mean, little theater, outside car, everything, so it won't be even set up for school committee for a few weeks. And then we will also, on Monday, May 14th, 2018, will be council meeting, 7 o'clock p.m. 7 o'clock p.m., that'll be our new start as we change the scheduling around by ordinance, and we will again be at the War Memorial Building on that evening as well. So just so we got that clear for the next 2 weeks, and the gals here have it clear too, so they can do what they have to do for making sure we have a hearing on coming up in the next finance meeting for some streets. So just want to make sure that was all set. With that being said, I guess we can start with item number 1, Madam Clerk.
Appropriation of $30,000 from Department of Public Works Highway Division, purchase of services to Department of Public Works Highway Division overtime. Invited Larry Rowley, Commissioner, DPW.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Councilors, this shortage was due to the storm that we had on March 2nd, that wind and rainstorm, and it was all storm related.
Recommendation. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. We moved back to the full city council favor recommendation. On the motion, Councilor Cruz.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
And it's really not about the overtime, but is there a plan in place to still sidewalks and a lot of branches down there? Have you got your people going around?
We're still doing that, Council. We're still picking up, and
I imagine
we
it'll take
still
a
have
while.
probably about 30 trees that we have to cut down.
Have to take down?
Yeah, that are in tough shape. So.
Okay, so just so the people know, we're still working at it.
Yep, we're doing that, and just for anybody that out there, and that we are starting plow damage. There was a lot of plow damage, curbs, lawns, walkways. We're going to start them next week and work right through the month of May, try to get them all done.
Beautiful, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Goes back to the full city council.
Tim.
Favorable recommendation.
Pass those around.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item number 2, Madam Clerk.
Appropriation in the amount of $2,779,0227 from U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, lead hazard control grant, the lead hazard control grant fund via the Brockton Redevelopment Authority, BRA. Invited John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Robert Jenkins, Executive Director of Brockton Redevelopment Authority.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening, Mr. Jenkins. How are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
Okay. It's
Excellent.
all yours.
Thank you. This
welcome.
is actually a lead paint hazard control grant that we applied for. Actually, the city was not funded about 4 years ago, and I remember under Mayor Carpenter's first term, we went down to Washington to meet with HUD, to meet with also Senator Markey. After Mayor Carpenter did his rounds and met with Mayor Markey. We then applied for the funds. Didn't get them the first time that we applied after they were taken away. Did get them the second NOFA that we applied, thanks to, more than likely, because we had a transition at the BRA to the mayor's office and also the BRA. Got that application in. We're waiting to get funded, and we had an intern who I'd like to introduce to you, Laura Chow, who's a citizen of Brockton. She was going for her graduate degree, needed an internship. We ended up hiring her as an intern, working for free to finish that grant, and actually we did get funded. With that said, any statistics you need to know about Brockton as it relates to lead paint, she is the expert. We then hired her from internship to director of the program. So she has all the data. I'm just here to make her look good, that's it. All right. All right.
Very good.
So we did get the funding, and I'd like to thank Councilor Rodriguez, because we were having a hard time with this initially. The city did get defunded 4 years ago. And it was pretty much a fight to kind of get it back. We're the second highest in the state as far as children under 6 being tested positive for lead. For us not to have a lead paint grant was a little bit uneasing, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, that's good, that's good. Well, here we are tonight, so that's what's most important,
Exactly.
thanks to her.
Thank you.
That's right, okay.
Any questions you may have?
Councilor Fowle?
Just, Mr. Jenkins, approximately how many incidents or types of interventions do you think this funding will allow us to do, approximately?
Approximately, we're scheduled for 144, 142.
144 units
Yeah,
over 3
142 units over 3 years. Along with our CDBG rehab program, we hope to do a little bit more, but that's what we're scheduled to do, 144 units over a 3-year period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Cruz?
Yeah, and just, so, first off, an English lesson, you don't hire somebody that works for free. You allowed her to come in and...
I'm trying to, once again, you're trying to make it look good here.
We'll move on from that. So, is the public able to apply for this, or how does it work?
It was a NOFA nationwide. It was competitive nationwide.
No, I mean the units that you'll do.
Oh, the units that we're doing, this is a grant and a combination of grant and loan program. For income eligible, it's a grant, straight out grant. For investors, it's a 0 interest loan, no
Okay.
payments.
And they would contact the BRA if they're interested?
They would contact Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Motion been made and seconded to recommend favorably back to the full city council. All in favor? Opposed? Goes back to the full city council. Favorable recommendation. Thank you both.
Once again, thank you, Council.
Good job. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, if
Councilor
there are no
Rodriguez.
objections, I'd like to make a motion to take number 4 out of order.
Motion been made and seconded. We take number 4 out of order. All in favor? Opposed? We're going to take number 4 out of order. Madam Clerk.
Resolved to invite Mr. Thomas Chalice, Supervisor of the Animal Control Division, to inform and educate the City Council and residents on how he and his team address domestic and wild animal issues and other concerns. Invited, Thomas Chalice, Supervisor of Animal Control.
Thank you. Good evening. I realize that Council from Ward 5, Ms. Beauregard, sponsored this one, so it's been a while and wanted to hear you, so that's why we wanted to bring you right to the forefront now. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you for being here.
If I could give the council a brief overview of what the Animal Control Department does.
Sure.
The Animal Control Department's mission is to protect the safety of the public and animals, ensure compliance with state and federal laws governing animals, educate and promote responsible pet ownership, provide temporary housing and care of animals, reunite missing pets with owners, and rehoming unclaimed animals. The Animal Control Department is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation, open from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. After regular working hours, one animal control officer is assigned to be on call for emergency situations. The day-to-day operation is overseen by the director, whereas the department falls under the guidance and direction of the police department. The current staff consists of 5 animal control officers and 1 kennel worker. In addition to responding to calls for service, the department operates its own shelter, Around 350 animals are impounded each year. Most animals are reclaimed by their owners within 1 to 3 days. Those that are not are behaviorally evaluated and if found to be adoptable, placed for adoption or transferred to other animal rescue organizations. The job of an animal control officer has greatly expanded over the last 20 years. In the past, the position was commonly referred to as a dog officer. The dog officer only attended to dog complaints within their respective communities, leaving all other animal complaints to other agencies such as humane societies, pest controls, fish and game service, or not handled at all. Animal control officers now deal with an ever-expanding array of domestic and wildlife issues to varying degrees. In Brockton, for example, animal control officers primarily deal with the following. We attend to all animal complaints within the city, the control of all animals, primarily dogs, impounding loose dogs, caring for animals at the animal control facility, reuniting stray, missing, or found animals with owners, rehoming unclaimed adoptable animals, the cleaning and the maintenance of the building and grounds. We record, maintain, and processing of all official records and other clerical functions. We respond to domestic and wildlife complaints. We aiding and transporting stray, feral, owned, or wild animals, sick or injured for medical attention or euthanasia if necessary. Removal and disposal of deceased animals. We investigate and prosecute violations of city ordinances, state and federal laws pertaining to animal matters, and other matters as defined in our job description. Dog complaints are still the most common type of call received. The complaints range from dogs being loose, animal waste violations, barking dogs, dog bites, sick, injured, owner surrenders, theft of property, and animal cruelty. Cat complaints, both domestic and feral, run a close second. Issues involved animals that are sick, injured, aggressive, biting, causing property damage, owner surrenders, and animal cruelty. Additionally, with feral cats, complaints of being unwanted, trapping, removal, relocation, trap, neuter, and release, and low-cost spay and neuter services. When it comes to wildlife issues, the Animal Control Department is only empowered to deal with wild animals that are sick, injured, deceased, or posing an immediate threat to public safety. Animal control officers are prohibited from dealing with nuisance issues such as trapping and removal from private property. Every complaint received is addressed either directly or indirectly. If animal control is unable to attend to the call, the animal control officer will either offer advice and resources or refer the individual to the appropriate person or place that would handle the matter. With that being said, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Council Beauregard?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll defer to Councilor Nicastro. Yeah.
Councilor Nicastro? Yep.
Good evening, Mr. DeChellis.
Good evening,
Thank you
Council.
for coming to address us and our audience at home. It's very helpful information. And I'm wondering, isn't it true that we no longer in Brockton euthanize animals?
That's not true. In rare occasions, we do. If an animal is aggressive or if it's sickly, those cases we would. We bring them to another facility. They take care of that for us.
All right.
But we're not going to knowingly adopt out an aggressive animal to the public.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Council Beauregard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again, Mr. DeChellis, for coming. We had met briefly, so we had talked about a couple of things. One of the things that we wanted everyone to know is that you have a couple of residents there right now, and one of them's going to a foster home,
Yes,
and the other two were victims.
Yes,
of
we have
abuse.
2 on an animal cruelty investigation right now, and 1 is scheduled to go to a foster home this weekend.
And then you had a couple of brochures, and we talked about was the wild animals. In particular, our concern lately seems to be with the turkeys. So we're getting a lot of complaints about the turkeys. And what do we do from here? And then I had another question, and I'll follow up with after
Well,
that.
when it comes to nuisance wildlife, we can't just come and take that away. We deal with the public safety aspect. I know we had a couple of turkeys downtown recently that were causing a little bit of a traffic problem. We did respond out many times for that, and we just kind of got them out of the roadway. The only ones that really can come in and relocate wildlife would be representatives from Mass Wildlife and the Environmental Police.
Okay, and you work with them if we have an escalation or
Yes, we do.
situation? Okay. Okay, and then we had talked about some people are concerned, sometimes they see a distressed animal, particularly in DW Field Park, whether they're walking or driving through, for example, and you said you had a couple of procedures in place or how people handle that if they were to contact you?
Yes, I mean, the park is multi-jurisdictional with the town of Avon, and we have had some issues with people in the park calling us for service. They haven't been happy sometimes when we refer them over to the Avon Animal Control Officer. They don't work the hours that we do, but we do try to explain to them we don't have jurisdiction on that side of the park unless we're called for mutual aid by the Avon Police Department.
So you're handling animals, and so if people call the Park and Rec Department, it's not correct, they need to contact you if there's a situation?
Yes, that's correct. If we can't, as I was saying, if we can't help somebody out with a particular problem, we will do our best to refer them to who can help them with the issue.
Okay, and the best way to reach you is?
Our telephone number is area code 508-580-7835, or if it's an emergency type situation after hours, or you can't get us right away, I would call the police department non-emergency line at 508-941-0200.
Okay, and the last part of this is now it's getting nice out. Are there any concerns people should look at? And I believe this is the time of year where animals need to catch up with their vaccinations.
Yes, we had a couple rabies clinics recently in the city. We had one at the Animal Protection Center on West Elm Street Extension and JM Pet Resort on Pearl Street. I believe representatives from the Elections Commission were at both locations issuing city dog licenses. One thing I would like to ask the public, we do pick up many animals that unfortunately do not have collars with tags on them, and I can't stress that enough to the public to please make sure that your dog is collared and tagged, and also with dogs and cats, seriously think about microchipping. It makes a big difference.
Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate all your hard work, and I had a nice tour again today, and seeing the changes over the years that you've done to accommodate a city of almost 100,000 people, and I don't know how many animals, and you mentioned that you've had other residents such as chickens and you said cats and chickens and some other unique
Yeah,
individuals?
we've had quite a few different animals over the years. I wouldn't be surprised if the moose and the bear start showing up soon.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'd like to move this over favorably. Thank you.
Motion been made and seconded to recommend favorably back to the full city council. All in favor? Opposed? Goes back to the full city council. Thank you.
Thank you, councilors. Have a good
Appreciate you being here.
evening.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
Ordered that the City Council approve the proposed amendment to the current water purchase agreement between the City and Aquaria LLC. Invited John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Philip Nasrallah, City Solicitor.
Good evening, Mr. Condon. How are you?
Good evening,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Chairman.
being
Good
here.
evening, councilors. This is a request to amend the present Aquaria water purchase contract by diminishing the amount that we're required to commit to each year for securing the plant for our use. Without objection, I'll take a couple of minutes to go through the contract structure itself, since some of these councilors were not around during its initiation. In fact, I think none of you were around when it was
You are
approved.
the only one. I wasn't even here for that
Yeah,
one.
and I think a lot weren't even around during discussions
I was on the
about
school
it.
committee.
So basically, that contract, which was negotiated in 2002, and its terms really came into effect in 2008 when Aquaria announced they were able to deliver water that had been constructed and permitted. So the contract structure has a concept called the fixed commitment. And that is the amount of the plant's capacity which is restricted to Brockton's exclusive use. And for that exclusive use, we make a payment. So that fixed commitment is stated in gallons. It's stated in millions of gallons per day. And it began in the first year of the contract at about 1.9 million gallons a day, and it grew through 10 years to 3.81 million gallons a day in steps. And finally, at the beginning of the 11th year of the contract, it's a 20-year contract by its initial term, and at the beginning of the 11th year of the contract, which is this calendar year, it was scheduled to increase to 4.07 million gallons a day. For that fixed commitment, there's a price, and that's a price that was stated in the initial beginning of the contract in 2002. It was frozen for that period of time until 2008 when they were able to deliver water, and since then it's escalated with the producer price index. And that fixed commitment price times the fixed commitment volume results in a fee that the city must pay to Aquaria. And at the present price, last year was about $6.5 million roughly. Might be a little bit more than that, but about $6.5 million. With that fixed commitment, we had the ability to buy on any day with 24-hour notice, zero, no obligation to buy any water, or up to the fixed commitment amount, which, as I said, varied during the initial years and finally reached 3.81. And for the amount of water we ordered to buy, we also paid a fee. And at the present pricing, if we buy 1 million gallons a day, actually buy it, it would cost us about $1 million at the present pricing. So it's about $1 million for every 1 million gallons in what's called the variable price. The contract has renewal provisions. It's the City of Brockton's choice to renew it at the end of its first 20-year period. It can renew in 5-year increments. The renewal price is going to be, if we choose to exercise it, it's our choice. The renewal price is somewhat different from the contract structure I just described to you. We would get a variable price which would be based upon the actual cost to operate according to the annual filings by Aquaria to the Department of Telecommunications and Energy, the DTE. So that would be examined, and it would also vary with respect to that fixed commitment price, because this is a bit complicated. I don't know where it would end up on the basis of this, but it would be based upon an assessment of the then current capital cost to serve Brockton, an assessment of what the new capital cost would be to improve it, to continue to serve Brockton, offset by the amount of capital cost that they'd already required through the first 20 years of fixed commitment price. Our expectation is if we would renew it, the fixed commitment price and the variable price would probably reduce a bit, especially the fixed commitment. So what this contract amendment would do would be to basically freeze the fixed commitment volume at its present pricing, wouldn't affect the pricing, but would affect the volume by freezing it at what was the volume amount last year in the 10th year of the contract, 3.81 million gallons a day. At the present price for that would provide a benefit to the city of about $455,000 each year in the water budget. It would be frozen in that fashion up until the year unless either party were to request to increase it again back to 4.07. The city could increase it if it felt that all of a sudden we were having some issues with respect to a lot of increased demand, and therefore by giving a year's notice we could get it increased, and that would give the Aquaria folks an opportunity to provide the investment necessary to deliver 4.07 million gallons on a sustained basis. They've delivered 4 million gallons a day to us in the past during periods of time when we tested it, but to be able to do it on a sustained basis so we could make that buy if we chose to every day, they'd be required to make some investment in the bridges over the Taunton River. There are 3 of them where the pipeline goes. It traverses those bridges. They've got some investment they've got to make there to be certain that the fixing of the pipe to the bridges would be okay. Aquaria may want to increase it if there were new fixed commitment volume buyers. I don't see it likely, and so far in all these years there haven't been any interest, so I don't think they're going to want to undertake that investment unless they've got fixed commitment buyers. However, if they do, and they decide to increase to 4.07, another provision of the contract would kick in, and that's a provision where the city could either, at its option, reduce its fixed commitment volume or reduce its fixed commitment price to offset the fact that now new buyers are taking part of their fixed commitment structure, their capacity structure. So even though we'd be going up to 4.07 in that case, we could be coming back down to some extent. There are provisions, so the amendment basically would freeze us at 3.81, saves us money. There are provisions in there that the city would also undertake a support of their efforts to improve the environmental impact of the plant on fish flow during the spring season when there's concern about fish eggs and fish larvae. We would agree that we wouldn't take water unless under emergency circumstances from the plant from May 1 into early June. The Aquaria, under the present contract, already has the ability to shut off the city's access, except in emergency circumstances for scheduled maintenance periods. This coincides basically with one of those scheduled maintenance periods, so it works in concert with that. And basically, that's it. The city, at the end of 2022, the contract won't have expired, but in 2023, the renewal provisions will kick in, so neither party can go back to the 4.07 after that period of time, except as the renewal period of the contract kicks in and it renews for 5 years. If we choose to, we have the right for 6 renewals under the original contract of 5 years each. So at the end of the day, if we chose, we'd have 50 years. So that's an overview of it, and I'll be glad to take any of your questions.
Questions, councilors? Councilor Cruz?
Thanks for the explanation, Jay, and some of us, it's been years of pulling our hair out about this. Obviously, they're interested in this because they don't want to invest any money right now. They can't supply us on a regular basis. If we said, yeah, or if the state said to us, yeah, we want you to stop taking so much out of the Jones River and out of Silver Lake, and we said, give us 4.07, they can't supply us with that.
Well, we don't know that. They have provided 4 million gallons on an intermittent basis or a brief basis. Their concern is that on a steady flow basis like that they're concerned about the railroad trusses.
Can we have Mr. Rowley up for a minute?
Sure. No objections, right? Mr. Commissioner?
It's not that, Jay's not a engineer, or engineering side of things. Your best opinion, they couldn't consistently give us the 4.07 right now.
I don't believe they could without doing a lot of work on the pipeline, going over the bridge, the railroad trusses, like Jay just said.
And is it all
'Cause
pipeline?
it's all restraining.
Is it all pipeline, or is it the plant itself needs work to do that also?
I think they gotta install another pump, but when we were taking the max from them, they did give us over 4 million for a couple of days.
A couple days, but
For a couple
clearly,
of days, but on a
the fact that
steady-
they're looking to do this is, they know they'd have to invest.
Yes.
Yes.
I guess then my question becomes, I mean, so we're looking at saving about 450,000 per year. Over 10 years, we're talking 4,500,000.
Right.
Are we locked into that number, or will that number vary?
Well,
That 455,000 per
Will
year?
probably increase because there's an inflation
The
index on the
saving
price.
will increase,
Yes.
or the cost will increase?
No, the savings will increase.
Okay.
So they would probably avoid about
We're not done with you.
They would avoid about $3 million, I think, in investment that they're
Okay, that's
required
my question, so,
And that was specified in the purchase agreement when we were talking about buying the plant. There was about $3 million that they would have had to, under that agreement,
and
to
did
do.
who looked at that for us, Camp Dresser?
Camp Dresser, yes, that's right.
And did they feel that number was
Yes, they
was
did.
accurate?
They did. So we would save over 10 years, 4.5 million escalated by inflation. They would save 3.3 million in present dollars.
In present dollars?
Yeah.
Clearly, they're losing money, they don't want to spend anything on
They
it.
don't want to spend the money. They prefer we buy it, actually, yeah.
And tell them to come back with a real price, and we'll be interested.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Monahan?
Larry, okay, for a second. Are we, do we need that much water right now?
No.
So we can get by with what we're getting from them now,
Yes.
with no
You
problem?
definitely can get through, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And for Jay, if they can't, now, are we coming up on a part of the, where they have to start producing more water by contract?
they're obliged to provide for us whatever we order each day.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I don't
Up to
think
what?
we're- Sorry?
Up to what? Remember? if-
Right now, it's
Yeah.
4.07, because
Right.
that's what the contract requires. Up until January, it was 3.81 million gallons a day.
So if they can't do that, would they be in breach of the contract? We just went along.
No,
as
they
a-
have a default provision in the contract, or several default provisions and cure periods of time, so rather than lose the value of the contract, they could simply spend the $3 million and take care of that problem.
Okay, and we're fine with the water that we're having now and what they have to produce with us?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
there's no issue in doing this, we just basically gonna save some money. They're gonna save money, we're gonna save money. So win-win more or less.
That's the way we see it, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Fowle.
Good evening, Mr. Condon. You may remember I was quite excited about this when I first read about it, and I sent you kind of a congratulatory email. But I fear I may have been a little premature, and I'll tell you why. I read the article that appeared in the newspaper, I think the next day or the day after, and I want to ask you if this is a correct quote. Condon said that Aquaria, as of January earlier this year, is required to be able to produce 4.07 million gallons per day. In a letter in late January to Aquaria representatives, Condon said the water company potentially could be in default if Brockton were to demand 4.07 million gallons per day consistently. Would that be an accurate quote?
I don't remember sending that letter. I'd have to check. I don't remember saying that. There were verbal discussions with them. I don't remember a letter saying
Well, all right, look, putting the letter aside, does that sound accurate?
Well, I think I just said that to Council Monahan, that they would be obliged, if this amendment doesn't go through, they would be obliged to produce 4.07 million gallons a day if we ordered it.
But did you have a conversation with Aquaria?
Oh, yeah, we both knew that fact, Counselor, that 4.07 million gallons a day was a contractual requirement. They were seeking to avoid the investment necessary to be certain they could produce it, and we were looking to avoid the increase in the fixed commitment that cost money.
But can they do that now?
Well, they can, because they have. They're concerned that they can't over time.
Okay, well, here's what bothers me, and I'm going to go back to a report dated January 15, 2016, and it was done by Camp Dresser McKee for the Brockton Water Commission.
Yep.
And it was regarding a letter of intent that apparently would need City Council approval and a home rule petition to purchase the plant. And it's too lengthy to go into in great detail, but I'm going to read from it. In addition to the analysis and model developed under this exercise, there are several other issues whose financial impact must be considered in conjunction with the purchase of the plant and which have not been factored into the current, strike that, into the economic analysis. These are intended to be evaluated in future steps under the LOI letter of intent and include the following: considerations with intake sizing, associated with long-term gun-to-boom reliability, no backup power. I don't think the plant has a generator. Possible bridge and finished water transmission main relocation due to extension of South Coastal Railway. Reverse osmosis membrane elements are approaching end of anticipated useful life. An upgrade of the plant and pipeline to 5 million gallons per day. And then it goes on to say the treatment, and this is on, I can provide this to the council at another time. On page 3 of this report, the treatment system capacity is rated as follows. Pipeline, 10 million gallons per day, notwithstanding limitations further discussed below. Building, at build-out can accommodate a production rate of 5 million gallons. Process as currently installed, 3.5 million gallons per day. Current finished water pumping, 3.3 million gallons per day with one pump in operation. Operation of both pumps required to deliver 3.5 million gallons per day. So I guess my question is, have they addressed these deficiencies? Do we know if they have?
You indicated the date of that was early 2016.
Yes.
So from the period of that letter until the time that we produced the proposal to purchase the plant, which was about a year,
Yeah.
a little bit over a year, many of those issues were addressed. Now, I didn't review that before I came tonight, nor did I review the old water purchase agreement, the actual asset purchase agreement, which expired because, the council wasn't inclined to
Yeah.
act on it. I didn't review that because that died on its own at the beginning of January. But my recollection is, in advance for this meeting, but my recollection is the main thing that hadn't been addressed at that point was the need to install additional pumping capacity to get to the 4, which Larry just mentioned, and the need to address the transmission of the water across those bridges, because the pipe is 10, but they were concerned about the way it was affixed to the bridges to be able to handle 4. The reverse osmosis things, I think those were all addressed in the time between then and the time we were going to purchase the plant. I'm not certain about that because they would have been obliged to address them had we purchased them.
So someone has seen documentation that the required work was done to address these
No,
issues?
you're asking me to look at, to make an assertion as to something I haven't reviewed for this meeting. What this contract does was to amend the contract, which is in existence now, so that that contract is more favorable to the city of Brockton. It doesn't address whether they are or are not capable of providing more than 3.81 million gallons a day if the city were to demand it. It doesn't address that. And I'd have to go back and look at what of those conditions was actually addressed later during negotiations to be able to answer your question fairly.
Then let me switch to the most recent negotiations. Did we ask for and receive a listing of all of the upgrades, repairs, replacements that Aquaria will be saving if we were to approve this amendment?
We know what was supposed to have been put into escrow and to be reviewed, the adequacy of it, to be the work to be reviewed by the city should we purchase the plant. That was priced out, reviewed by CDM, and thought to be adequate. And they were supposed to place that in escrow had we purchased the plant. So yeah, we did have that.
Okay, and that was within what time frame? When did we do that?
Last year.
Excuse me, when did we do that?
Last year.
We did it last year?
Yes.
So we've seen documentation that that's
Well,
what...
at the time that the asset purchase agreement was negotiated, yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess where I'm going with this, well, two things, councilors. Number one, you know, we're at a serious disadvantage because we're part-time people. We have no staff. We're focusing on a decision that has 10-year implications, which may or may not be favorable, but we're only hearing one side of the equation, the people who want us to do it. And I'm not trying to be snarky about it, but if we can find money to do a $68,000 legal study and whether we retaliated against a plaintiff that won a court case, or we can fill a position at the police department for public relations, it just would seem to me that for us to make an informed decision, we ought to have some type of an independent, objective look at this. My attitude is, you know what? If they can't perform to this contract, I think the taxpayers would want us to step in and do something about it. I don't think they'd want us to sign off on an amendment that's favorable to Aquaria and just simply say, well, you know, for $455,000, we'll take it and we'll let you off the hook. You don't have to live up to the original agreement. And that may seem a very hard position, and I'm sorry to take that position, but before I was elected, I remember how hard it was for Councilor Rodriguez just to get someone from Aquaria to come in here, just to discuss issues. And it wasn't until I think you stopped funding that suddenly a bell went off in someone's head and they came in and said, oh, gee, I think we ought to cooperate and come in. So if we approve this, if we ultimately do, we're going to bind future mayors and future city councils to the agreement, and I'm just not ready to do that. If they can't produce the amount of water per day that they've agreed to produce, and if Camp Dresser McGee's report is still at all accurate, that the maximum potential they have is 3.5 million gallons, I say the hell with them. I'm sorry to be hard about it, but a contract is a contract. It's not, well, it's a contract, but you know, if I can't live up to it, you know, let's try to work something out. And you know, if we were going to make a couple of $1 million a year, I might be interested if they were going to shave that off. But $455,000 a year for all that they're going to save, not having to replace membranes.
Council, that's not true. They're obliged to maintain that plant under the present contract.
That is true, but the amount of volume of water that you put through those membranes clearly would require replacement sooner rather than later if we were to ramp up production.
Well, you're talking about ramping up by 7%.
I'm
So
sorry, I missed
by
that.
7%. I think that statement is unfair. Councilors, your call. The asset purchase was never heard by the city council. I never gave a presentation on that. Some of this information would have been in your hands if it was. So it was clear the council wasn't desirous to make that purchase. That was something you didn't think was a good deal. I thought it was, you thought it wasn't. That's where it ended. The reason we're here with the asset purchase modification, or the contract modification, is because Aquaria wanted to go through. They weren't able to go through because I said, we are not going to get 8 votes out of the city council to get this done. It's a waste of everybody's time. We'd like to save some money. You'd like to save an investment. That's how we got to this point. Maybe somebody else, just as on the contract that we just negotiated, would have come up with a different deal. This is what I came up with. I think it's a fair deal, but if you decide to test it, you're going to have to buy 4.807 million gallons a day every day for a period of time to find out whether it can or cannot produce that water, number one. Number two, in the same time that you're doing it, you're going to be paying that extra $455,000 every year to determine whether they're going to be able to make it work or not. Number three, much of what was in that report, which is now 2 years old and was superseded by some later work, much was in that has been taken care of. They're obliged to take care of the plant in order to produce every year according to the contract that they've got. I think it's worth saying yes to. You can do what you want with it, but at the moment, you've got a water budget which hasn't sufficient revenues to pay for the services you want. There's no capital in the next year's budget because your water rates won't support it. I've got, at the moment, without layoffs in that budget, but no capital, I've got $300,000 worth of expenses that Larry's asked for that I don't think I've got the revenues to pay for. But I do have $455,000 in that budget, which we may be able to avoid. So,
If I could...
Your call.
If I could reclaim the floor for a minute.
Council Fowler, you still have it, I didn't say.
We're paying the price because an idiotic contract was agreed to years ago. And I don't like having a gun to my head. I've said this before on some other issues. These people, Aquaria, or whoever owns it, in my opinion, and I'm inferring from what I've read, from the CDM report, what I hear from Mr. Condon, they sat back and they didn't do anything because they were probably pretty sure we were going to bite and buy the plant. Otherwise, they would have been ready in January to produce the amount of water that they're contractually obligated to produce. And they didn't do it because they probably figured, you know what? We're going to, shall we say, victimize the taxpayers again and have them buy the plant. We can wash our hands and we're off of it. Now, I'm not saying that for fact. I'm inferring from what I'm reading and what I'm hearing that that's the case. And I'm not going to get pulled into that. I think if we were to amend this contract, it's worth a lot more than $455,000. And I don't believe that they've lived up to the contract. And I think that if you put all of the information together, it's very clear that they might be able to do 3.5 million gallons per day on a sustained basis, but I agree with Mr. Condon. I don't believe they can go over that railroad bridge with any more because I believe it's the diameter, it's either the diameter of the pipe or the weight of the water being pumped, and I don't remember which. Because if we had purchased the plant and we wanted to go to 10 million gallons or even 5 million, we would have had to negotiate with the railroad company to put another pipeline across that railroad bridge, and if they said no, we would have had to tunnel under the river. So I've spent an awful lot of time looking at this because there's a lot of money at stake. So again, I may sound harsh tonight, but from the onset, this contract has not favored us, and I'm not quite ready yet to bite on another 10-year contract that is so binding and I don't think is that financially agreeable to the taxpayers. And with that, I thank the chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lally.
I want to touch upon, how long ago this contract was put in as well. I don't think it was, the best when it was implemented. But when they voted on that in 2002, I was 5, so I did not really have a say in any of this. What concerns me is that the Aquaria appears that they don't want to invest, and as a body representing, really their only client, it's kind of concerning when the person you're getting a service from isn't really wanting to, invest in order to make sure that service can be fully relied upon. I think that, we definitely need more money when it comes to, the water department and everything like that. And that would be the only reason I would, consider voting for it. But it's, can we get more from this? Can we tell them we need you to shave more off in order to make this advantageous for us? Or, we've been forced to sit and ride out this investment, good or bad. Or is it time that we have them do the same? Is it time that we turn around and have them ride out this investment even though, you know, they're getting hurt over it too. That is a question I do have. Is it in any way possible for us to tell them, you know, we want more?
Yes. Vote it down or postpone it. I'll tell them the council is not inclined to approve this contract amendment at the present price or the present terms. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what will happen out of that. You know, I don't. Be careful what I say. It seems to me that there isn't much respect for the work that I and the negotiating team have done in all of this. The thinking is you're getting taken for a ride. Some of what Councilor Farwell said was mistaken. It isn't the volume on the pipe. It's the pressure of the pipe getting 4 million gallons a day as it's affixed to the, you don't need a new pipe, it's size for 10. It isn't a 3.5 million gallon plant now. It is capable of doing the 3.81. They made some investments. I wasn't able to go back in preparation for tonight's meeting. I didn't expect it would be a question to see exactly what they've done, but some of that investment has been made. It isn't fair to say they don't invest in the plant. They have to replace those membranes on a continuous basis in order to supply the water compliant with the water quality aspects of that contract, which I sent to all of you. So those statements aren't correct. I'm not certain what will happen if you say no. Maybe they'll say, well, what price will it take? I don't know. What I find is when I come here, I get rejected on it, and I don't know what the price would be. I'll tell them it's a lot more than $455,000 a day because it seemed, or a year, because it seemed to me there wasn't any sentiment at that price, and see what happens. So yes, the answer is sure. Sure. What I don't think is a good strategy, though, is to attempt to test it at 4 million gallons a day, because you've got to pay them for the water they're producing. You've got to stay at that fixed commitment volume, which costs $455,000 a year, and you might play a game of chicken where they fix it by $3 million worth of investment. You've wasted your money trying to get there. I'd rather try to do it at the table and see if they will be forbear, because at the moment they've not sent us a bill at 4. They've operated in good faith to say at 3.81 to see if they would forbear another bit of time while we went back to the table to see if we could accommodate the council. But I don't know what the sense of the council is to what the price would be.
I also had a question for Commissioner Rowley. So this 400 grand, you really need it this upcoming year.
I do.
You do?
I do. I'm up here all the time moaning and crying about the water infrastructure. I mean, it doesn't take a day off. You saw what I went through this past winter. I had over 100 water leaks within 8 weeks. So I really do need it to do something. And just, Councilor Fowler, just for you know, like Jay just said, that pipeline was sized to take 10 million a year. The problem is, it's not the size, it's the fittings or the joints that come up over the railroad trusses. They didn't restrain them properly, so they're afraid they're gonna blow apart. That's the only part. They only have to do some restraining there. Not a lot of work on their part to do that. And they gotta add another pump. So I don't know where you got the information they have to go through there's no way in hell they can go through that river. It would never be permitted. So I just wanted to clear that up.
And we talk.
Well, stop. Councilor Lally still has the floor. We're all jumping around, we're not gonna do that.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's fine, Commissioner. So Councilor Lally, if you're done, then there's some others that have not yet been heard.
Just want to, one follow-up thing.
Go right ahead.
We talk about it almost every other day about, issues going on. By far, I call the DPW more than any other department with constituent issues. So I know how much, is put on your guys every fiscal year. So just thanks for letting us know.
It's just, I have so many streets in everybody's ward that are in disrepair, and I can't do them because the infrastructure below that is so bad. I don't want to put a new road in and a day later go and dig another hole, because you're all going to look at me and say, what the hell are you doing? That's another thing. I can't do the road repairs without new infrastructure. I'm not only talking water, I'm talking sewer and I'm talking drain. I mean, the city, this is an old city. We have to come up with something. Or you're going to make me retire earlier than I want to.
All set, Councilor Lally?
Yes, thank you.
Councilor
Thank you.
Castro? Yes.
Mr. Rowley and Mr. Condon, thank you for coming to us. I have technical questions. on these contracts. I'm a virgin as to these contracts. I spent the weekend reading them. Thank you for sending the original contract to me, Mr. Condon. On this amendment, I have a lot of questions about how this all works, but I notice in number 2 on the amendment, we're collaborating with Aquaria to obtain Beaudry environmental permits. Through the magic of Google, I was not able to find out what those environmental permits are. Please tell me.
Well, I don't know to be honest, I don't know exactly what those permits are. Basically, the permit at the moment has a Department of Fisheries permission to install this thing called a gunder boom, which is a big screen that goes across a good portion of the river, and it restrains fish eggs and fish larvae from being caught up by the intake ability of the plant. What they're looking to do, and that is permitted, what they're looking to do is to get the Department of Fisheries to agree that it could be replaced by this other mechanism, which would be far less intrusive on the river itself, and it would be also would not require the taking of that gunder boom out and putting it back in the spring and in the fall. So there would be an environmental benefit, and there would be a benefit to Aquaria in doing that. What we've agreed to do in order to gain the Department of Fisheries concurrence with that is that we wouldn't take water from the plant during the period of May through early June, a 40-day period. They're entitled under the contract as it exists to 5 maintenance periods where they can take it offline and not be in default. That is one of those maintenance periods, basically. So we would agree that that would count as one of those maintenance periods. Unless there were an emergency, we wouldn't take any water. That would be helpful to the fish migration pattern, and it might gain the ability of the DEP, Department of Fisheries, to agree to this substitution of the boudre for the gunder boom. That's my best explanation of that.
Why does it have to be that time of year?
Because that's when the fish are migrating in the water.
Okay.
That's when the small fish and the eggs are migrating. It's a spawning period.
Okay. And under 4B, they talk about necessary expansion work to the plant. What's that?
Well, that's what Councilor Farwell and I were talking about.
Right.
To my recollection, there
Right.
are 2 things that need to be done. One is to install an additional pump at the plant itself to allow the capacity to move from 3.81 to be consistently at 4.07. And the second is to be working on those railroad trestles where the pipe now crosses to be certain that the additional pressure for 4.07 wouldn't dislodge the pipe from the trestles. Those are the jobs.
It's not spelled out in here, and that's why I wondered. You know, you're defining the benefit to the city as $455,000 a year. And I know that's a good amount of money, but it's not all that we need, certainly. And I'm just wondering, has an analysis been done about the net benefit to Aquaria and the net benefit to the city?
Well, the net benefit
of this proposal?
Well, the analysis was the one I described to you, where
Yes.
my expectation is they'd save a $3+ million investment right now, about 3.3 as I recall, and we would save $455,000 a year for 10 years. Discounted back, it seemed to me about the same.
Why can't we get some of that $3.5 million as a reduction of some sort?
Well, we might be able to. When we discussed it, this is what we arrived at. That was my answer to Councilor Lally's question, to disapprove it or table it, and I'll say that it's not going to get approved at the price that we've set. They have loans outstanding from Banco Santander. So to get this approved, they needed the approval of their lender. So this has been okayed by their board and by their lender. And to diminish their fixed commitment pricing, that $6.5 million, to keep it at that as opposed to growing, it would affect the cash flow that the lender sees in order to be able to service the loan. So that's a complicating factor.
I have their DPU annual return for the calendar year of 2016. I'm not sure they did any work to it in 2016 based on the figures on here.
Yeah,
I was interested to know, I don't know if you know, the principals that work there, they don't get an annual salary?
No, there are employees who are paid, but the principals who are officers of Aquaria are not paid by the Aquaria revenues. They're paid by the parent company. Okay. So I think the principals you saw were probably maybe Moises Rodriguez or Alfredo Andres. Those individuals are not salaried out of Aquaria's revenues. They're oversight from the corporate entity.
Okay. Wait, I had another question. What was the city's use of Aquaria water last year?
In 2017?
Yes.
Do you know how much we took, Larry? I would think we probably took a couple million gallons a day for a period of time in the late spring and early summer, and then took water when you were flushing hydrants, but I'm not sure of the answer to that. I'd have to get you that, Counselor.
I don't want to give wrong figures.
Yeah, I'd have to get you that.
I would like to know that.
Yeah, I can get you
Yeah,
that.
we can easily.
Okay. And the last thing is, where is the delivery point? Where is the delivery point where the water comes into Brockton?
It's up by the Brockton Eastern Line on Pearl Street, I think, isn't it?
Right near Pastor Benny.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
behind Pasta Benny.
In front of it.
Right, almost next to it.
You knew that. Okay.
The vault is right at Keneally Beef, if you know where that is.
I do know where that is, a little bit further down.
Right there.
Okay. And do they come here and test the water?
Every day.
They test the water every day. Is it true that we draw about 100,000 gallons of water every day and put it in the river?
They flush the system about 300,000. They flush their system every day to keep it fresh, about 300,000 gallons a day into the river.
And are they able to do that legally? Do they
Yes.
have a permit?
Yes. They dechlorinate, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
When it comes to Aquaria, this entire city knows how I feel about Aquaria, because I'm the one that basically, when I first joined this council, we tried to get an answer from Aquaria, from the folks from Aquaria to come before this body and basically give us just a simple update of what's going on with that production of water. No matter how hard we tried, nothing got those people here. And it finally came through a budget, as you said, Councilor Farwell, we cut the budget down to $1. And Lord and behold, they were here the following week, wanting to talk and make a presentation to us. But we're sitting here today talking about Aquaria like they were a department of the city, instead of looking at them as a vendor to the city, where they have a certain obligation. It's like you going to a store to buy something, and you're sitting here, you've got your money, you pay them every time, you pay them on a regular basis, but yet somehow they're having difficulties providing you with the services, but you're sitting here, we're all sitting here coming up with excuses as to why, there's vibrations on the bridge. Well, you know what? When they were selling the project to the city, they weren't talking about vibrations to the bridge. When they were selling this project to the city, they weren't talking about the fact that they can't produce water in the months of May and June because, again, whoever signed that contract shouldn't have signed that contract. Because if you can only, now, God forbid we have some sort of an emergency in the city where, let's say in late May, we have some water issues, like the same thing that happened a couple years ago when the pipe burst in East Bridgewater. But if it happened in late May into June, guess what? That system can't come online because of fish eggs. So I'm sure for emergencies,
Yes.
for emergencies it can, but a sustained emergency, can it go for weeks at a time if that system
Yes.
takes that long to repair?
I would
Can it
think
go
so,
for a month?
I would think so.
Can it go for 2 months? Well, then if it's not a problem, if it can go for 2 months, 3 months, 3 months, we should lift that restriction in terms of saying it's available 24/7, 12 months a year. But again, I just find it, and you probably knew from right off the start that I wasn't going to support this.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, I'm not. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because
That's your choice,
I
Counselor.
made a decision long ago that I wasn't going to lift a finger to help this company out that basically embarrassed this body on several occasions. It became embarrassing to a point where next item on the agenda, Aquaria. Is anybody here from Aquaria? Did anybody here from Aquaria? Did Aquaria call anybody? No, they didn't call, or they sent an email or a text. an hour before the meeting. It got to a point where it was embarrassing for this body. So I made a promise to myself that I was going to lift a finger to help this company. And if I can do anything to make sure that they go under, I will do it. And if a no vote, and I hope that I'm the deciding vote, if a no vote means that I vote them down and they go out of existence, so be it. Because they have not respected this body, and they've collected nicely from the city of Brockton for the last 10 years. They couldn't care less whether or not the treasurer's office was vibrating. They were collecting their money because it was their money, it was due to them, and that's all they care about. Now all of a sudden we're going to sit here and say, well, they wanted to amend this thing to renegotiate this because they can't really do $4 million, but can we give them a break on this? They can't really do 5 or so because of the vibrations of the bridge. Not my concern. My concern is to write them a check every year, and I expect them to produce the water. And if they can't produce the water, so be it, it's on them. I am not going to lift a finger, and I hope that my colleagues on this body as well too, for the sake of the taxpayers of this community, do not do the same thing. This company has not been good to the city. They have, on a regular basis, disrespected the representatives of the people in this city, and I hope that we do not lift the finger to help them out. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilors that have not been heard? Councilor Derncourt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Condon. Thank you for coming down. So I have a quick question for you. According to what you said, that the city will save $455,000 a year. So how did you guys come up with this number?
I'm sorry?
How did you guys come up with this number?
Oh, that's the value of reducing the fixed commitment from 3.81 from 4.07 by reducing that annual price is a volume times a price and a rate, and that's the savings if you drop it down to that at the present price.
Based on your analysis, so you believe that by saving this amount of money for 10 years would be in benefits of the city?
I think it would. Okay. I wouldn't have brought the proposed amendment forward if I didn't think so. That's simply mathematics. What the value is on their side, I think it's $3 million or so. I can go check that out. Mm-hmm. I can check out the questions that Councilor Powell was asking. What have been the substantive changes to the plant from the time of that January 2016 report? But I think there's a rough equivalence between the two of the $4.5 million over 10 years and the $3 million in savings. We need the budgetary relief, whether we do it this way or another way. We need the budgetary relief. I think that's indisputable, and the $4.5 million over 10 years is just mathematics. And it should be higher than that because it ought to be inflated about 2 or 3% a year based on.
Okay, so let's say that we table this. Is there a possibility for you? I'm asking you an honest question to go back to them and saying that, well, the city council has voted against it in terms of looking for more money.
Yeah.
So would you be able to go back to them and sort of trying to renegotiate this with them?
I absolutely would. I would say, I don't think we have sufficient votes in the city council to get this amendment passed under its present terms. I don't know from this discussion what it will take to get to 6 votes. I really don't know that. But I can say, let's take another crack at it. But I will say this. We're in budget time now, so I'm not likely, budget preparation time for the city, I'm not likely to go back to the table with them between now and the time you get the budget. So you'll probably have a budget which has a 4.07 million gallon fixed commitment in there. Unless they give me an email over the phone and say, yeah, drop it to 3, I don't know. But I've got other work to do right now. So I don't know when we'll get that. We may get it later, I don't know.
This is kind of very interesting based on that. It's very complex, but according to what you said is that, let's say that we table this. Would it be detrimental to the city, or is just something that we can just move on without facing any consequences?
If you table it, I will indicate to them by email that the council is not inclined to approve the amendment in its present terms. Okay. That there is some additional advantage to the city to be determined, which you're seeking. And I would ask them, and I don't know if they would grant it, I would ask them if they would forbear for a period of time in fiscal 19 to go from 4 to 4.07, which they're entitled to do under the contract as a gesture of good faith. They may or they may not, I don't know. Because we wouldn't be asking, because if we were to do it that way, we'd be saying, we won't demand, I think, wouldn't we be doing that? We aren't going to ask them to give us a concession at the same time try to put them in default. I wouldn't think that's your intention. So we would say, we won't demand 4 million gallons a day for X period of time if you will forbear from increasing under what the current right is to 4.07 while we try to come to new terms on an amendment. If that's what the council is seeking to do, I think we maybe have a chance. But if you think we're going to say to them, drop your price, don't charge us 4.07, and we're going to start buying 4.07 in a budget that doesn't have the money to do that, it doesn't have the money to do that, and we're going to try to put you in default, I don't know whether we have any chance of getting to an agreement.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I do believe this amendment is a wonderful one, but in the past, given the situation, of course, Council Moore.
There's no doubt there's been a bad atmosphere and bad dealings between the city council and Aquaria. I don't think that's been true on the city side when we've been dealing with them. I think Larry will say that in his daily dealings with them, it's been a pretty professional relationship. At this level, it certainly hasn't been good.
I mean, you know, it's like listening to my colleague, Council, what you guys, based on what they've been through in the past, it seems like there was some kind of like unwillingness to sort of like coming down to talk to us, and we have to sort of like beg them. And of course, like he said, I mean, I think, you know, they are a vendor to our city, but according to what you said, and I do believe that you put a lot of work into this, and I greatly appreciate the fact that you do this, but I'm sort of like not happy with what they've been doing in the past. I mean, although I do believe this is a wonderful amendment. Mr. Corley, Mr. Chairman, can I ask Mr. Corley a question? This gentleman over there, can I ask you a question?
No objection, sure. Commissioner.
Mr. Worley. So I believe Council Lally asked you a question earlier regarding this weather. Do you think we have a necessity for that, or we can just move on without even worry about this?
A necessity for what, Council?
To have this water as of like, you know, let's say that we voted against
For the savings that we're going to get back?
Yeah. I'm just asking, I don't know, I'm just asking you know better than that.
At this point in time, I'll take anything in my water budget so I can do some work.
Okay. So there's
Right
a
now, like
necessity.
Mr. Condon said, my budget is just level funded, and I can't do anything out there. I'm going to be hard pressed to do maintenance work in this upcoming budget.
So having that $455,000 will do a lot of justice to you. Is that right?
It would.
Okay.
It would help me a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor, if I might.
Yes, please.
I think if I could get an indication from the council that they are willing to continue this, but not under the present terms, I have a chance of asking Aquaria to stay where we are at the present moment as if it were still 2018. We won't demand, you won't charge for that 4.07 while we try to come to new terms. Maybe we won't get there, and I can put an end date on it and say, let's see if we can get there or not, and if I can't, we'll come back and say they won't move. Or if I can, I'll say, here's what they'll do. But as it stands right now, if we simply table this without an indication that I should go back and try to get concessions, we're going to lose the ability to get the $455,000. If I can get them to agree to freeze it, we're okay. We've got money in this year's budget to pay. We can maybe put next year's budget at, say, a quarter of the $455,000 to get us the summertime to get it done. I don't think that's a bad compromise, but you know, it's something, because we're stuck at the moment.
Just to go back to some of those that, everyone that wanted to speak has spoken, so I'm going to return to those that already did. I'm going to start with Councilor Cruz, then I'll go to Councilor Fowle, and I know Councilor Monahan. So, Councilor Cruz, you want to go back? Yes.
My concern, I hear what my colleagues say, and the difficult part is knowing, are we getting the most fair deal that we can? I get that. And that's my hesitation, and my first thought is, let's put this off for a couple of weeks and see what you can go back and say, look, you know, the council wants it sweetened. But some of the things I've heard, with all respect to my colleagues, are almost ridiculous. Has Aquaria been a good partner to this council, in particular in the city? No. But we have an opportunity. Councilor Fowle said he hates to burden the next 10 years. We are already burdened. We have the contract. It's here for another 10 years. We're paying that higher number starting this year. That's it. Now, can we say, we're going to make you spend $3 million, which might be 4 or might be 5. That's really where we need to find out. Was that work done? If they're really on the hook for $5 million, we should be getting a little better deal than what we're looking at right here. If they're on the hook for about $3 million, we're talking $4.5 million over 10 years. I cannot look my constituents in the face and say, just because I don't like them, we refuse to take that deal. My constituents don't want to pay, and by the way, it's not taxpayers, it's ratepayers, which is different in this case, because the water system has out-of-town people on it. All the taxpayers do not pay for this. The ratepayers pay for this. And I would ask what will be a rhetorical question at this point, but if we turn this down, I will be proposing a water rate increase, and anybody who votes against both is just foolish, because we can't run the system. Let me ask you a question. That $455,000 a year, what would that be just to replace that in a water rate increase? How much would we have to go up?
Well,
And I know that's kind of a quick number I'm asking
well, let's
you
see.
for.
Let's make the revenues 20 million. They're not, but they're just short of it. Make it 500,000. So what's that? 4%? Does that sound right?
So just to replace what we have an opportunity here. Now again, I think we do want to ask Mr. Condon to go back and say, look, sweeten the deal a little bit. But at $500,000, let's say, we would have to do a 4% rate increase just to offset what we're going to refuse to do here. Talk about biting off your nose to spite your face. I'm sorry, but my feelings were hurt too when they didn't show up. So what? That's not what our job is. Our job is to take care of the ratepayers and the taxpayers and the voters in this city. I think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard to say, well, you know what? Let's make them pay it. Then nobody wins. Nobody at all wins in that case. They fix a plant that we don't want, that some people do, but we as a council have pretty much made clear we don't want, certainly at the number that was talked about. We make them spend that money, and then we have to spend that money for water we're not. All I've heard for the last 10 years is we're paying for water we're not getting. We're still going to be paying for more water that we're not getting. This is an opportunity to fix the issue that every councilor I've served with has complained about for 12 years. And we're going to walk away from that? I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I do think there probably is some more money in there that we can get. But to turn it down would be a sin by this council, a sin. And a fiscal sin that I think every one of us should have to face up to every ratepayer if we turn this down and say, because I had my feelings hurt, I refuse to save you money on something that we don't want or don't need right now. So that's all I want to say, and thank you very much. And I will be making a motion to postpone this for 2 weeks and hope that you can get something going,
Yep.
because I do think it can be sweetened more than that. Yep. But let's not bite off our nose to spite our face. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor.
I haven't made the motion yet. I know there's people who want to speak.
Yeah.
I will be making the motion. Thank you.
Let me go back to the others that want to speak. Councilor Fowle.
Let me just respond to Commissioner Rowley and Mr. Condon. I went to the Water Commission meeting in April of 2017 at the Arnone School. It was a public hearing on what the water rates should be. From April 2017 to today, we have not received one communication from the Water Commission as to any recommended rate increases. So I don't want to hear that somehow if we turn down or we are not satisfied with $455,000, the council is at fault. Where has the Water Commission been? I mean, if you needed the revenue, wouldn't you two be on top of the Water Commission and come in and get to them and say, send something to the city council? Because now when we, let me finish. Now when we go to raise rates, if we have to, we're going to have to raise them more than we would have because we've waited an entire year. That's number one. Number two, through the chair to my colleague from Ward 1. I'm not saying, nah, I'm not going to play ball with Aquaria. Neither you, nor I, nor anyone else here has one single piece of paper from Aquaria outlining how they arrived at that $455,000. We don't have one document from them. All we have is the order that was filed, a letter from the mayor, and a copy of the Water Services contract. Now, we all talk about being a strong council and being involved and being analytical. What have we analyzed? We've heard from the chief financial officer and the DPW commissioner, and that's it. We don't even have any recommendation from our own legislative council, who hopefully will look over that proposed amendment. So it isn't that I don't want to play ball with Aquaria. What I don't understand, and again to all of you and Councilor Cruz, if they are not capable of living up to the requirements of the current water services agreement, why do we let them off the hook? What is the reluctance to say to them, you know what? We're going to hold up payment until you prove to us that you can pump on a sustained basis 4.07 million gallons per day. No, we're not going to pay for it. You prove to us you can do that. Now, I took the time to get out of the town of Swansea. They happen to have a 2.3, a 2.5 million gallon per day desal plant. And I spoke to the water systems manager, or the executive director. He's got 40 years experience. And he said to me, you will never know the capability of that plant, meaning Aquaria. He said, I was around when it was built. I followed the permitting. I followed how they approached the whole issue. You will never know the capability of that plant until you pump on a sustained basis, 24 hours a day, a substantial volume of water to find out, will the pumps hold up? Will the membranes hold up? And we've never done that. I would think that Commissioner Rowley and Mr. Condon and the rest of us would want to know, just in case of a catastrophic event at Silver Lake, what will that plant give us? We might have to depend on them for a day or two if we had something happen that prevented us from pumping from Silver Lake. No one seems interested in that. Well, we don't want to test it because we're going to have to pay for it. Well, they're going to magnanimously give us $455,000 if we don't hold them to the contract. We freeze it at 3.81 million gallons per day. So I agree with Councilor Cruz on this. We shouldn't jump at this. You don't take the first bite that comes your way. And I do think it should be substantially more. I'd like to see it up around 1.1 million per year in savings if we're going to do this. But I'm not prepared to jump, folks. I'm not going to do it. And I'll stand before all the constituents citywide, not just in Ward 1, and I will defend my position, and I will indicate why I was not ready to simply take this agreement as submitted and embrace it and think that it's the best we can do for the taxpayers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. Councilor Monahan.
Jay, do you think if we postpone this, is there a possibility they won't go for it? Well, they won't agree to this, or are we going to be?
I don't know. You folks haven't been in these consultations with them or in these negotiations with them. I do take issue with a couple of things. We have tested this plant. We haven't tested it for more than 4 or 5 weeks at a time, but we've tested it, and we've tested it at volumes above 3.81. I think Larry can substantiate that. So that much is true. We haven't tested it for months on end. They have made investments in it as they've needed to, because that does show in the DTE filings. It doesn't show for 2016 apparently, but I know they made some in 2017 because of the asset purchase agreement. I don't know what they'll say. They may decide that it's better to avoid the investment and give us another concession, but it isn't just their decision to make, just like it wasn't my decision to bring it to you. They've got others to deal with. All we can do is to say they wouldn't go for it. I heard a number just a few minutes ago. Maybe it is $1 million. Maybe we need to double it or double it in half and see what happens. We'll see. And if they say no, then we're stuck where we are. That's where we are. That's what like Councilor Cruz is right about that.
A part of your negotiations was if we decide we want to do the 4 million, whatever, it's 4.7 million, you can renegotiate that? Is that?
Well, the four is baked into the contract that exists. The 4.07 is baked into the contract that exists. We can't avoid that unless we amend the contract, and both parties have to agree to do that. The cash flow that they're getting off 3.81 is baked into their present cash flows that are being filed with the DTE and shown to their bankers. So it's not a hard decision for them to make, I don't think, to say we can live with that number because we're already living with it and we seem to be able to service our loans. If we back off from that, we're either going to have to change the price, which is in the contract, or we're going to have to reduce the volume from 3.81 maybe back to one of the earlier numbers, an 8-year number or a 7-year number. That's worth hundreds of thousands a year. I don't want to do the math in my head. And by the way, my math was wrong. I think it's probably 2%, not 4%. You got me doing that off the top of my head. I don't know what will happen. We have nothing to lose really to try. I don't see any reason you shouldn't try. I mean, if I had the votes, we'd go ahead because I brought it to you. But if we don't have the votes, then we ought to try because it doesn't make any sense to simply say, well, that's it, let's pay the 4.
Now, if we didn't do anything in the contract, we're forward. You're talking about now we're going to have to pay for that 4 million a day for so long? if they upgrade it?
Well, we owe it to them as of the beginning of January. They haven't billed it at that level because we negotiated this, we brought it to the council. It had to be reviewed by all sides, and so they just stay where they were. They may be willing to stay where they were because I don't think they want to spend the money on that bridge. I don't
Right.
think they want to do all those bridges. I don't think they want to do it. So they may agree, okay, we'll go back to the table. We won't bill you at 4. I'll ask them, do us a favor. We promise, we won't try to put you in default by demanding 4. You promise that you'll come back to the table and continue to bill us at the 3.81 and see what happens. And let's put a back end to it so that we don't go on forever. That's what I would think.
So what I'm hearing from my colleagues is it's more than likely this wouldn't pass tonight. So you have we sort of do have them a little bit over a barrel maybe. I don't know, but you can go back and possibly negotiate with them a little bit more, try to get them to freeze their price, what have you, and then come back with some other possible, maybe a little better deal or whatever. But I don't think, from what I'm hearing, it's going to
There's
pass.
no votes tonight, I can see that.
Yeah, I can see it too.
I can see
So I'd
that.
hate to pass that money up, but I don't think it's going to pass. And I think as long as you can get a pretty good idea that they're willing to maybe listen and maybe do a little more and come back, and that's probably the best we're going to do, I think, tonight.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Larry, and then Councilor Nacastro.
I just want to, second bit here. Ward 6, going off of, Councilor Cruz and talking about, Ward 1, Ward 6 has a sincere need for improved water pressure. The vast majority of the streets I represent are in, a condition that certainly warrants, repaving. The problem is that we don't have the money. $455,000 is not going to flip everything on its head. It's not going to be a revolutionary amount of money. It is something that would be helpful if we haven't started to plan ahead or plan for the future or done something to make sure that our long-term plan will be better off for our infrastructure by this point. That is no reason to not start now. That being said, we, Councilor Farwell, Councilor Cruz, both absolutely right. You can't just jump at this. I think that whether we vote on this and move it to council and then postpone it, or whether we just postpone it or table it now with an end date in mind, I have faith that Mr. Condon, can work his magic and can tell them, look, you've got to do something.
So far, Council, my magic has been neither black nor real, so on a query. I will contact them.
Well, as long as as long as we, we're not going to lose anything by giving Mr. Condon and everyone going to the negotiation table another couple of weeks to try and see what they can squeeze out of Aquaria. If it's not going to be, if whatever happens, the council decides is not good enough, then we vote it down whenever that arises. But we lose nothing from giving them that extra time. And so I think that we're absolutely better off postponing for now. But push comes to shove, the ratepayers, the water rate might have to go up anyway.
It does.
It doesn't?
It does.
It does? Okay,
Absolutely
yeah, it does.
has to go.
It's gonna have to go up anyway, so I mean, we all have to answer to the ratepayers. That's what we're here for. We need this investment in infrastructure, our infrastructure, not Aquarius. If they have trouble paying for their own stuff, that's on them. But if we can make it work to our advantage, we shouldn't slam the door in their face.
Just remember, Councilor, when you're working on an item like this, you all of a sudden become like you're a councilor at large because you have to take the whole city in perspective. I don't like it when I hear somebody say a ward needs more than another because you won't want to know my list.
I'm not saying we need more than you. I'm just speaking from
Councilor
my
Nacastro?
area.
Mr. Condon, I thought the filing, the paperwork that we were given for this evening was a little thin as well. I wanted to request that you prepare a written analysis of those net benefits to Aquaria. I am interested to know the condition of the plant and improvements that were made last year, and also the net benefits to Brockton. Of course, our duty is to protect our constituents and to make the best deal for our constituents, and I really need to know that information.
I heard you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Motion's been made and seconded that we will postpone. On the motion, Counselor?
Mr. Condon did indicate he's going to get busy with the budget. Perhaps we should inquire as to what date you would recommend we come back on this issue. Do you have a
Well,
preference?
you can always postpone again, can't you?
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Go ahead, Counselor Cruz.
My thought is that in 2 weeks, we can, if all the information or if there's ongoing talks, that we can always postpone again.
That's
I'm
fine.
afraid if we postpone too far out, we'll be into
June.
the budget season and lose opportunity. Plus, my motion being 2 weeks is that maybe Aquaria realizes, let's get this done quickly, too, because it behooves them. It's good for them, it's good for us. I don't care that it's good for them, but it's good for.
Okay.
If their board has to meet or take some action and you find out it has to go longer than 2 weeks, perhaps you
Just
can just
notify
let
the-
the
I'll just
president
let you
know.
know. I'll just let you know. I think it will, but we might as well put it out for 2 weeks. I can let you know whether they've even responded in 2 weeks. That it will take longer, I'm almost certain, to get to an approval if we even get anywhere else. I'm almost certain.
So we'll go for the 2 weeks right now. We'll go for the first meeting in May, which will be May 1st, then you'll
I'll
contact me
stay
as
in
well.
touch.
Yes, okay. All in favor? Opposed, so it's postponed to the first Finance Committee meeting in May. Thank you, Mr. Condon. Thank you, Commissioner, as well. One other item, just before we conclude, I do want to make mention to you that the elevator contract has been awarded. It was awarded to Contractors Network Incorporated, and they're out of East Providence, Rhode Island, for the low bid of $377,000. As far as I know, the contract has gone out to them and waiting for return, and once it comes returned with signatures, then work will begin. So we do have somebody in place to start working on the elevator at City Hall, which is good news. The length of time, I'm not sure of that, but at least we can get going. So any other business, Council Beauregard?
If I could have a moment of personal privilege.
Sure.
Hope everybody that is enjoying their vacation, school vacation. Just want to highlight the annual event, actually the 11th year of the National Coin Week celebration is going to be this Saturday at 1 p.m. This is the one where you get free money. Yes, this really happens, and we recommend kids come in about the age 7 and adults. The theme for coins this year, through the U.S. Mint, is connecting cultures from many to one. And again, this is at the main library, free to everybody. At 1 p.m., they recommend that people sign up. 508-580-7890, extension 301. And it's a really good time, workshops, again, free money. It begins at 1, and it's the 11th year. A good 100 or so people end up coming. So enjoy yourselves the rest of your school vacation and be safe. Thank you.
All set, Council? Anyone else? Council Lally?
I wanted to announce that I have a ward meeting coming up at the Brookfield Elementary School Wednesday, April 25th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Just a standard kind of informational update. A couple of department heads, the mayor, people like that. Brookfield School, 6:30 p.m., April 25th. And because it was mentioned today, April 26th is the water rate hearing. All right, thank you.
Any other business come before us this evening? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.